Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm David Jones and I thought I would do a quick video on crude oil. Just looking at the technicals, the charts, because I do wonder if there's a trade. You know, we've seen the price of crude oil slide by, or over the last couple of weeks, we've seen a big slide. We've seen a fair old turnaround today. The price has rallied by a couple of dollars, but does it really change that downtrend in crude oil? So I think, as usual, I think there are potentially a couple of trades here. Depending on whether you've got a medium-term point of view, there's perhaps a trade that we need to be a bit more patient for, or from a shorter-term point of view, there could be a trade either later today or tomorrow. So I thought let's just jump in, jump at the charts, have a look at the levels, and see what happens next. I'm recording this on Wednesday. It's the day of the US interest rate decision, so that's due out in about 3.5 hours. Plenty of market volatility. Usually on those days, at the moment I've got a couple of trades open. I'm long the S&P, I think I talked about that last time round. So that's on a trailing stop for me. I'm long US Treasury bonds. That's on a trailing stop as well. I'm not looking to do any more trades until this announcement's out of the way. I'd probably do the same thing for oil. Let's see how things calm down. So perhaps the first short-term trade is one for tomorrow. But I'll talk through the ins and outs in a second when we jump on the charts. Before we get into it, just if you're new to the channel, there's a few things I do. I do a live stream every Friday, starts at 2:30 my time here in the UK, just as US markets are opening. Of course, this Friday is the non-farm payrolls. So if you haven't subscribed, click on subscribe and click the notification thing and you'll get notified when the live stream starts. It normally runs for about 45 minutes, looking at a mix of different markets and trades. I run a couple of training courses on how to trade, been running them for a few years, 5-star Trustpilot reviews. You can take a look at those on the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. For the last 18 months or so, I've run a WhatsApp group where I talk about trades I'm looking at, trades I'm running, what's going on with markets a few times a day, and run a Q&A session. If you'd like to look at that and have a look at some of the webinars that I've done just for those in the WhatsApp group, the most recent one was on options trading. You can try it out by going to the website, subscribing and using the code YouTube for 20% off the first month. And finally, I do a newsletter every weekend that's free of charge. I'll put the link to the last one in the description to this video and you can sign up for it if you're not signed up already. Right, that's it. That's all the marketing stuff done. Let's take a look at the markets. Let's take a look at the price of oil and see where the trades might be. Let's take a look at oil over recent years. Of course, we had the run up to, where was it in the end? Above $130 a barrel on the Russian invasion of Ukraine back in early 2022. It had the second go in the summer of 22, so a couple of years ago now. Couldn't break it. And then we saw the slide from about 124, traded as low as about 64 in the first, 4 or 5 months of 2023. And if I zoom in, you could argue it's all been a bit boring since then. You know, we've had volatility in the oil price. You know, we've seen it. So going back to those May lows were about 64. It's been almost as high as 96 last September. So that's a 50% swing. And then it just dropped back. And earlier this year, you know, I did think there was a trend forming in oil. If we pick that up, so that looks something like that. But it did sort of fall out of that trend in May. So it's been quite scrappy trading, I think, for oil. You know, if you're in that trend, there were good gains to be made if you're in the trend early enough. But since then, you know, you can see since April, we've had a fair bit of chop. The market's gone from about 88 down to 72. And here we are now trading at 78. I do wonder if there is an opportunity in the short term and perhaps the more medium term. So let's take a look. So if you thought that the current slide in oil that's been in place only since the beginning of July, and we've seen the price go from 84 down to about 75, so slightly more than a 10% fall in the oil price. If you thought that was an opportunity, I think there's definitely a trade there. And there's a couple of ideas. I think the aggressive trade, I mean, we're seeing oil turn around today. Yeah, it's a fairly big day today at the time of recording this. I've still got the US interest rate to come out tonight. So the aggressive trade here is to be a buyer and perhaps stop the other side of yesterday's low. So the other side of, what's that, the Tuesday low from this week, the other side of 75.40. on my chart. If you thought, well, actually, we're going to see a much bigger rally in oil from here, then my preferred trade would be a stop below the June lows. So the other side of 72.70, which is, a $5 stop based on where the market's trading now. But if we think it's going to go all the way back to the highs from 2024, the highs from earlier in the year, there's perhaps $10 upside in that trade. So on the face of it, it's a 2-to-1 risk-reward trade. So I think that's quite an interesting one. I'd rather be a bit more patient when it comes to that, because again, let's not forget, it was only yesterday, Tuesday the 30th of July, it hit its lowest since the beginning of June. For fans of the oversold, overbought indicators, we do have the 10-day RSI did go oversold yesterday. It's the first time we've seen that oversold since, got to go back to early June, and back then it did call the turn. All right, so there's another argument there for being a buyer based off the daily charts. But for me, it's rare that markets make handbrake turns. We usually get, a bit of chop. If you look at the top in oil last time, it took a while to roll over. Admittedly, the last low, we did have something of a handbrake turn there. But if I take a look at the hourly charts, even though it has started to break out of that downtrend, and I've picked up on that downtrend going back to, when is it? The 18th of July. So it's only been a couple of weeks, that downtrend. It has started to break out of that downtrend. For me, it hasn't yet taken out any sort of previous major high on this trend. We've got the highs from Monday of this week at 78.60 or thereabouts. We're about, 70 cents below that. I think that's quite an interesting level to watch. And then we've got bigger highs up at 80. So for me, perhaps in the short term, the trade I would do, I'd still look to sell short. So I'd look to be a seller with stops perhaps above 80 at the moment to see, do we get the retest down here and do we see the buyers come back in? Because we have had good rallies along the way for oil. We had just last Thursday a move from 77 up to 79.5, and it ultimately ran out of steam and the market moved lower. So for me, it's an interesting one on the dailies because we have had overall a fairly sideways year, lots of volatility, no real direction at the moment. The trend for the last couple of weeks at least has been down. We're seeing a bounce at the moment. It's gone overbought on the hourly RSI. So interesting to see what happens in the 78.60 to 80 zone. But for now, personally, I wouldn't be rushing to be a buyer. Interesting to see what happens over the next couple of days over these interest rates and also the non-farm payrolls on Friday. We'll take a look at it again on Friday in the live webinar. But I'd be leaning towards still being a seller. But I do think, from a daily point of view, it is interesting to see if we do get some sort of base during the summer for the price of oil. And the big level for me for now are those June lows, 72.70. But as I say, in the short term, I think I'd rather be a seller than a buyer of oil. So I think it's interesting overall. Like I say, I would still be leaning to be a seller of oil to see if it's going to run into trouble again at those previous highs. Let's see what happens over the next couple of days. I'm expecting perhaps some volatility tonight with the interest rate decision, perhaps get a clearer look at it tomorrow. We'll take a look at it again in the live stream on Friday. But there's definitely the argument as well, because we've pushed down near those recent major lows, that perhaps we'll see it turn around. But for now, I'd be a seller of the rally. Let's see how it all works out. Go to the website to find out more about the stuff I do. Try out the WhatsApp group. Have a look at the newsletter. The latest one is in the description to this video. And subscribe if you haven't. But for now, that's it. So until the next time, good luck with your trading.